This is Hannibal from the HannibalTV.com, and I am live. I am going to review the Wrestling Observer newsletter that came out today. So here we go. In WWE news, NXT debuted yesterday night on the USA Network. This is going to be the show that's going to go head-to-head with All Elite Wrestling starting October 2nd. From the personal reports I've had from fans, they said it was a very usual show. Nothing really stood out to them. Triple H on his conference call did not make any predictions for what the rating would be, so it's unknown what the rating is still at this point. It is interesting to note that when ECW debuted on the USA Network, it had, or not on the USA Network, it was on Sci-Fi. They had a huge first rating, and it went down from there, ultimately being canceled. AEW was able to get a commercial for their Wednesday night shows on some of the markets where NXT aired on USA. They also had their commercial air nationwide on SmackDown this past Tuesday. According to Dave Meltzer, at some point, some of the backstage stuff at the NXT show felt a little small time, low rent. The 400-seat arena came across like you'd think. They did get rid of the ramp. So some fans commented personally to me that the show was very average and boring. The show overall was low on star power for the public and name value for names that people would recognize. NXT did not air live in Canada, and it won't air live in Canada. It's only going to air on the network, to my knowledge, in Canada. WWE held their Clash of Champions pay-per-view on September 15th, and it was generally a weak-received show, according to Dave Meltzer. And all the reports I've read of all the events last weekend, there was a UFC show, AAA, that the Clash of Champions was the worst of all the shows. And I'm not counting Impact at that. They had a couple shows that had like $5 and $7 tickets, and one of them had 100 people. The other had maybe a little more than 100. So those are in a class of their own. Joan Alvos is asking who my favorite wrestler is of all time. I don't know. I would say it's tied at 3 of Undertaker, Ric Flair, and Macho Man. For the current product, Brock Lesnar. In other news related to Clash of Champions, the current pay-per-view by estimates are $12,800 for that show. Last year's September pay-per-view, which was Hell in the Cell, did $16,300, so that's a pretty big drop from last year's pay-per-view numbers for September. The decline comes at the same time that WWE Network numbers have also gone down. Right now, WWE Network subscribers is down 21.6% from last year. For the next pay-per-view, which is Hell in a Cell, the show's live tickets are not selling well. At this point, only 6 of the 22 upper deck sections of the arena are on sale, and 3 lower deck sections aren't for sale. And this is in Sacramento, which has historically been a strong WWE market. Kevin Owens has been working all the WWE shows despite being fired, according to a horrible storyline that they have. And apparently they're doing an angle where he has a wrongful termination lawsuit, but he's still working all of the shows. So how can you be terminated and still be working the shows and say you're fired? Just a horrible WWE angle. For WWE attendance, there was an NXT show in Cocoa, Florida, September 13th. It drew 150 fans. There was only one scheduled WWE main roster house show that was supposed to also happen on September 13th in Chattanooga, but that show was canceled. On September 14th, WWE Raw had a house show in Macon, Georgia that drew 4,200 fans, which is a phenomenal number for a WWE house show, even though there was only one last week. September 16th in Knoxville was the Raw main event tapings that had 4,800 people in attendance. And then September 17th was the SmackDown 205 live tapings in Atlanta, Georgia, that had 6,000 fans. NXT last night in Orlando had 400 fans for their TV tapings. Moving on to AEW news notes. Last week, they applied for an All Elite Wrestling Dynamite trademark, which would lead some to believe that their TV show might be called Dynamite. Tickets for the November 13th Nashville AEW taping went on sale last week. There was nothing special for ticket sales reported. According to Dave Meltzer, the major difference with WWE when it comes to TV tapings to AEW is WWE is booking the A buildings in the markets, even though they're only drawing like 3,000 to 6,000 fans, not coming close to selling out those A buildings. However, AEW is running the smaller buildings overall, with a few exceptions. And they are also running November 20th in Indianapolis at a building that is going to be set up for 5,000. So they're going to continue to run those smaller buildings. Is there anyone on the AEW roster I think is good? Lee Marshall is saying, I don't know if that's any relation to Stagger Lee Marshall, the former WCW commentator. I think he's passed away now. Chris Jericho, he's good. And speaking of Chris Jericho, he appeared on NBC's America's Got Talent on September the 18th. For New Japan Pro Wrestling notes, their financial report was recently revealed, and they grossed $50 million from the period of August 1st, 2018 to July 31st, 2019, which would be their biggest gross in history. That was up 10.8% from last year. They also drew a total of 436,000 paid attendance over the course of that time, which is the sixth year in a row their live attendance has increased. So New Japan has been increasing in revenue and attendance. John Moxley said that he wants to work both the January 4th and 5th Tokyo Dome Wrestle Kingdom shows. For the November 9th New Japan show in San Jose, they're running a 2,500 seat building, and there hasn't been a major demand for tickets for that show yet. There's lots of tickets still available. Couple more WWE notes I forgot to mention. Raw's rating this past Monday was the 6th all-time lowest Raw rating. WWE now has 129 wrestlers on the main rosters and 136 wrestlers in training. So for the first time, they have more wrestlers on their roster than WCW did when it was at its peak for number of wrestlers on their roster. SmackDown this past week had the lowest all-time rating that Dave Meltzer can recall for males aged 12 to 17. So even though it's a kids-related product, they had the lowest all-time rating for young males. And the final episode of Straight Up with Steve Austin, the last episode of the season, which aired after SmackDown on Tuesday, did 848,000 viewers. Now on to my least, well, actually, Yeah, I would actually say I have less interest in Impact than NWA. I'm more interested in NWA. So I'll say Impact is my least favorite of the supposed major companies, even though they're getting less than 10,000 viewers right now for combined Spike, or not Spike, combined Pursuit and Twitch viewers. They might get some more viewers when they move over to Access, but supposedly Access still has less viewers potential than Pop TV did. And Destination America, Explosive Phoenix says I should be a wrestler in AEW. You got to tweet that to AEW. And Christopher Daniels is their head of talent relations, from what I understand. But I mean, like any company, the executives of the company are hiring their friends. So we'll see how ratings go. If ratings go well with all the executives' friends being hired, they'll continue on that path. If they don't go well, Tony Khan might say at one point, okay, we're going to have to open it up to some more wrestlers that you guys don't necessarily have past relationships with. Jim Ross has stated that one of the problems in the history of professional wrestling is when you have executives involved in companies that are also talent. So we'll see how that works out for AEW. But back to Impact Wrestling. Anthem purchased AXS TV. That was announced last week. A number of major executives of AXS TV were let go. No time slot has been announced yet for when Impact will air on AXS, but it's going to be after Bound for Glory. So someone's asking, can I see Killer Cross in AEW? Apparently, Killer Cross is still under contract to Impact till the end of the year, even though they're not using him. So apparently he has friends in AEW, so it's likely he will go to AEW from what I understand. The first major change Anthem made to AXS was to get rid of the Friday night MMA fights, which were very popular on the station. Nothing has been said in stone regarding the future of New Japan or Women of Wrestling. Women of Wrestling is scheduled to tape 12 weeks of TV this week in LA. When the sale of the station story started to become known, this is according to the Wrestling Observer, there were some in Impact that felt that that would lead to a New Japan Impact relationship happening, even though New Japan had no knowledge of the sale prior to it happening, according to reports. New Japan is running Ring of Honor arenas later this month on their own, and New Japan ticket demand is greater than Ring of Honor. We have seen that everywhere. Ring of Honor is not doing well for ticket demand these days. For the first time in years, New Japan was not part of Ring of Honor War of Worlds tour this year, and Ring of Honor talent has not been on New Japan shows as much in Japan or in the US. It was notable that there was no Ring of Honor talent involved in the Super J Cup this year, nor advertised for the next set of shows in California and LA and Sacramento that I just mentioned. And AAA was at Madison Square Garden's Hulu Theater this past Sunday. They ended up having 3,000 fans. They ended up having a good walk-up, which is usually the case for Latin America fans. And the pay-per-view numbers were extremely low for this show. Apparently 60 or less, that is 60 pay-per-view buys, even with Cain Velasquez on the show, but it wasn't promoted that well. I did have Hugo Savinovich, who was involved with the promoting on that show, on the Great North Wrestling podcast last week, and he admitted that they could have done a better job promoting it. There was some markets that had high percentage of Latin American in the markets, Latin Americans in the markets that had zero buys. So that says something about that show. We don't know the pay-per-view numbers yet, but from what the Wrestling Observer is reporting, they've heard that it's also very low. Between visa problems and injuries, 18 of the advertised wrestlers and referees that were scheduled to appear on that card did not appear. AAA is doing another event October the 13th in Los Angeles at the Forum. The only thing that's really been announced so far about that is Cain Velasquez is going to be on the show. Conan is working with AAA, of course. I believe he's one of the creative there. And he's also working with Impact, MLW, and AEW. So, yeah. Mark Lawson is asking how superstar Billy Graham is doing these days. I'm not really sure. He hasn't been as talkative as much. He does post regularly on his Facebook. He does send me messages about various videos that I post. He is a subscriber to the Hannibal TV, but he doesn't watch as much wrestling lately. He still follows the news. He still has health issues related to skin cancer and heart issues he's dealing with. I still get requests all the time, people bothering me about Billy Graham appearing at autograph sessions and stuff, and they send me messages like, well, we're willing to pay him a lot of money, or we're willing to go to Phoenix and meet him. But the thing you guys don't understand about Billy Graham is he has severe heart issues. I've seen him walk 30 feet and been completely out of breath and actually have to sit down for a few minutes to be able to talk. He can't walk upstairs, so he can't commit to meeting people for autographs because his health is literally day to day. So that's the update on superstar Billy Graham for you, Mark. For Ring of Honor news, the advances for both the September 27th Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view and the pay-per-view tapings the next day at a place that only holds 900 people. Very few tickets are sold for both events. Final Battle on December 13th in Baltimore is traditionally their biggest event of the year. Tickets went on sale for that one recently, and they only sold about 150 tickets. So that's pretty bad. Matt Tavern's contract is expiring soon. He's the champion, from what I understand, unless that's changed. Marty Scurll and PCO's contract are also expiring. PCO told me flat out, this is not rumor, that his contract expires with Ring of Honor December the 1st. And he said a lot of other guys' contract expires around that same time. And he said he has some big news coming for me, possibly sooner than later. And he is going to do another video shoot interview with me to announce that news. So take that for what it's worth. Vernon is asking me how my health is doing. My health is doing amazing. I've been medically cleared to be back in combat sports since December 2013, and I'm training on a daily basis. So my health is excellent. For NWA news, I said last night in my daily news update, which, by the way, I also post on the Great North Wrestling iTunes podcast page. So Great North Wrestling Podcast. I always put the link in the description. If you want the instant audio uploads, just subscribe to that. But I'm also doing these video updates because this way I can answer questions. And it's live. My friggin' home phone is ringing. Sorry about that. Danny Purdue is asking me where I think Killer Cross will end up. I don't know anything about Killer Cross other than what I've been reading about his Impact Wrestling contract disputes, but I believe it will be AEW. For the NWA, they have signed Jim Cornette to be their color commentator. So that means he's officially off of MLW, where he was working on a show-by-show basis. NWA, as I mentioned last night, they're doing small studio TV tapings in Atlanta, which is a major market, at the end of this month, and they haven't sold out. and likely there's only a few hundred tickets for these events. So it's pretty sad that they're claiming to have a world champion and they can't sell a few hundred tickets. They've added the Rock and Roll Express yesterday, so hopefully they'll help sell. I mean, Rock and Roll Express has also been added to the New Japan America shows just as kind of a bonus. But Josh Barnett held his blood sport show September the 14th in Atlantic City. According to the Wrestling Observer, I haven't seen the show. It was a pay-per-view. No numbers are out from the pay-per-view. The show was not as good as the WrestleMania weekend show overall. And Josh Barnett apparently had a very good match. Harry Smith, Davey Boy Smith Jr., who's wrestling for Great North Wrestling in Rockland, Ontario, just outside of Ottawa, about an hour and a half away from Montreal, October the 19th. He's wrestling for the Hannibal TV heavyweight title against Nathan Banner, who's held that title for over a year. He had the best match on the event, defeating Tom Lawler, who I have also defeated Tom Lawler. That match is at the Hannibal TV. The show was presented in front of a few hundred fans, but it was in a small building, so it looked like it was packed, and apparently they were really into the show. Someone's asking me if I would sign with NWA or AEW, if I'd want to go back full-time. Well, neither of those companies are full-time. So, of course, I would sign with either one if the money offer was right. That way I could still do my YouTube channel, which I love, and it's my passion, and it's growing. And I'll say it right now, my YouTube channel has a lot more subscribers than both the NWA's YouTube channel and MLW's. And Billy Corgan is a multimillionaire, and MLW is a lot better funded than me, which I fund my own stuff. And I put a lot of this stuff out free, and I'm no millionaire. I still work a normal job, and it's just an average job. I don't have any college education. I went right into wrestling out of high school. Tom is asking me how I think Lady Yasmine would do in WWE. Lady Yasmine, of course, is wrestling for Great North Wrestling October 19th in Rockland. For the Women's Championship of Canada that Jessica Black currently holds, Black is defending that title this weekend in Hawkesbury against Eve. More information on both those events is at thehannibaltv.com. Lady Yasmine is 22 years old. I'm the one that actually recommended her for her recent WWE tryout. She was used as an extra at the May tapings in Montreal, and then she was used as a tryout woman for the Sept or August tryouts in Toronto. I haven't asked her if she's heard back, but I believe she would have probably heard back by now if she was signed out of that. But unfortunately, there's about a 2 or 3 months process to get your medicals done. So she's probably not allowed to say if she was signed until after those medicals happen. That's in case people fail the medical or the drug test, such as in my case. The reason why I had my contract rescinded was because at the time I had a medical condition that I failed when I was signed by WWE. I've since been cured of that medical condition, but I never got another chance, even though I was told the office was really high on me and I was the best wrestler of the camp I was signed from. But how would Lady Yasmine do? I think she would need to be in the development system for a little bit of time. But she's young. She's 22. She's been in wrestling for 5 years. She had her very first match in Great North Wrestling. Almost her entire career can be found on the Hannibal TV, so that's pretty cool. But I think she could be a big star. She's lost a lot of weight. She's lean right now. She's better looking than many of the wrestlers on the roster. She has the passion for wrestling. So I think she would do very well, and that's why I recommended her for the tryouts. There's a couple of questions I'll answer before I get on to the MMA news. Am I still receiving messages from Billy Jack Haynes? Luckily he stopped messaging me on my cell phone. I blocked him on Twitter. Originally, why Rob Feinstein did that stupid video with Billy Jack Haynes was because Rob Feinstein wanted me to wrestle Billy Jack Haynes on the House of Hardcore event at the ECW arena in November, because Billy Jack Haynes is going to be on the autograph session involved with that weekend. But nothing came out of that. Rob sent me a few messages. I said I'd be interested if the price was right, and nothing came of it. So that was the whole reason. The last thing that Billy Jack put out there was a work. So that's the whole scoop on Billy Jack Haynes. A couple more questions here. Do I think Tessa Blanchard will sign with AEW when her Impact deal runs out? I don't know how much longer her Impact deal is for, but she is going to sign with a major company for sure when that deal expires, either WWE or AEW. I'm positive WWE would want her. Where would I put the original ECW as far as all-time rating? Someone is asking me. I can't pronounce your name. I don't know what you mean by that. They had some all right matches in the company. I'm a big fan of most of the ECW original wrestlers, but the only matches I saw when it was popular were from their TNN show, which wasn't very good, and they've admitted that. And prior to that, it was just random matches I had seen on tapes. But I'm a big fan of the original ECW wrestlers, like Shane Douglas. I'm doing a Great North Wrestling podcast with tonight. So anyone with questions, suggestions for that, write them in the comments. Richard L. is asking me, what's my opinion on out of shape and smaller wrestlers getting pushed? Does it annoy me? Well, yes, it does, because I am in shape. I'm a legitimate athlete. I'm a former national champion at amateur wrestling. I've won the Canadian Open in grappling. I've been wrestling since I was 17 years old. I'm 36 now. I've been involved in all aspects of the business. I've been an alternate in Greco-Roman wrestling, and I'm 6'4", 275 pounds, and I can't get a job, but young kids that wrestle in their street clothes can get jobs. So yeah, that's the way for someone like me to see. Good day to you too, Brian Rose on there. So let me get into the UFC news. Yeah, it's come out that Monster Energy is paying between $9 and $10 million a year to advertise in the cage with UFC. The November 2nd Madison Square Garden UFC show is going to be promoted as the 500th live UFC event in history. Justin Gaethje, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, beat Donald Cowboy Cerrone in the first round of the main event of last weekend's UFC event in Vancouver. Austin Hubbard, who defeated Kyle Pribolic in the opener, had to be rushed to the hospital following the event because he passed out in the hotel elevator. So that's not good. I'm sorry to hear that. MMA. This is one of the reasons why I would tell Cain Velasquez to sign with WWE to a big contract, so he doesn't have to take any more hits to the head. He's done all he can in MMA. It's a dangerous sport. For the UFC show at the Rogers Arena in Vancouver, they drew their second biggest crowd there in history, 15,114 fans for a gate of 1,334,932. Was the second most attended UFC event in the history of that venue, so that's good. The 50,000 bonuses went to Michael Perina and Tristan Connolly for fights of the night. But because Perina missed weight, Connolly got 100,000. So that's pretty good for. I think it's a female. I'm sorry, I don't follow UFC that closely, but I know I have a lot of UFC fans on this. I was a bigger fan of the old UFC, so I am giving the news, and I am going to follow it more. Performance of the night went to Justin Garthy and Misha Sirkunov. So there you go. That's the wrap up for UFC Vancouver. What do I think of Ben Askren coming back so soon after a knockout that he suffered? If anyone didn't see that Ben Askren knockout, that was crazy. And Ben Askren, I have interviewed him last year. You could look that up on the Hannibal TV before he signed with UFC. He probably just wants to make money. He's young, and it's his decision if he wants to come back and fight after that knockout. So best of luck to him. I actually like UFC or Ben Askren. Jake Hagar, I mentioned this last night. Jack Swagger, he's fighting October 25th in Newcastle, Connecticut, facing Anthony Garrett. I looked up a fight of Anthony Garrett, which Anthony Garrett lost in under 30 seconds. And he lost that fight by literally curling up into a ball, putting his hands over his face like this with the back of his head towards his opponent. So just so anyone that's not an MMA fan knows, or who hasn't trained in MMA, that's not a good defense. If you get knocked down, you should go on your back and face your opponent and try and get him in guard. So the whole thing that I saw there with the guy curling up into a ball, I mean, this is just another guy to be fed to Jack Swagger. So they're building Jack Swagger up. For Combate Americas, they've signed another pro wrestler, Melissa Cervantes, who's better known as Cobra Moon on Lucha Underground and Thunder Rosa. She currently wrestles for Women of Wrestling. She's 28. She signed a multiple fight contract, and that's been confirmed. And Combate Americas has that Alberto El Patron Tito Ortiz fight coming up, although no date has been announced for it. Tank Abbott says he'll be surprised if it happens. We'll see. Tony Adovani, who is a big fan of the Hannibal TV, thank you for your views, asked me who's the best fighter to take Khabib's title. I don't know. George St. Pierre would have definitely done it, in my opinion, but that match is not going to happen. If the Conor McGregor fight happens, Conor, who knows? It really depends how seriously he takes the fight, but I would not put my money on McGregor. But I believe that fight might happen because it seems like McGregor really wants to get back in UFC. Mala says Lashley versus Swagger would be interesting, but it's not going to happen because Lashley is signed to WWE now, and he's older. He does have a pretty good fight record, but he's signed to WWE for the next few years, and he's not going to fight again, in my opinion. And I have met Lashley when I did an Impact match a few years ago, and he was a really good guy. I talked to him, and he did an interview for the Hannibal TV around that time, and nothing but good things to say about Bobby Lashley. He's a great guy and a really tough guy. So thank you for all your questions. So normally you have to pay for that information. I'm giving you the best notes from that. Richard's asking me, would I ever consider fighting MMA? Of course, but only if the pay was right and it was enough pay where I could actually do at least an 8-week training camp and not have to do a regular job for those 8 weeks.